How to shade and draw realistically. So your objective is that you guys are going to learn about value in pencils, and you're going to create a value scale that shows shading, hatching, and cross hatching. So there's 3 different techniques that we're going to do, and you guys are going to practice learning. More than likely, you are not going to, Joey, join the Zoom on your Chromebook. More than likely, you're not going to use hatching and cross hatching too often when you draw. The blending one will be the one that you use. So right down here at the bottom, this is an example of a value scale. So it goes from white to black and has different values, different shades in between. Blending. So blending is the technique of shading through smooth, gradual application of a darker value. So you're gradually going to keep adding values, and you gradually get darker. You don't just go in with your darkest pencil and like press as hard as you possibly can and color it in. Hatching are parallel lines, which I'll show you. So they're all lines going in the same direction. And then cross-hatching is lines that are crossing. They're crisscrossing in different directions. They shouldn't be like an X, but they are going to be crisscrossing shapes. And then shading is the use of light or dark lines to give the illusion of form. So what you're trying to do is make things look realistic when you draw them, which means adding all the shadows and highlights on there. And then value is the element of art that describes the darkness or lightness of an object. So there's lots of different types of pencils. After we're done here, I'm going to show you guys my types of pencils. You got a bag that should have 5 different pencils in there. The difference in pencils is how hard or soft the graphite is in the pencil. So that's what determines what kind of pencil you have. The softer a pencil, the darker it'll get. And the harder a pencil's graphite, the lighter it'll get. So harder pencils are lighter, softer pencils are darker. And I try to like think of it like butter. If you take butter right out of the refrigerator and you're trying to spread it, it's super hard. So it's hard to spread. So when it gets softer, it's easier to spread and you get more on there. So like if you have a B pencil, it's soft, like more of it comes off when you try to use it. And pencils range from 9H to 9B. H is the harder pencils. They're the light ones. B are your softer pencils and your darker ones. A pencil can be bought as sets, but all you really need is 1 or 2. It shouldn't be say a half. Say 1 or 2 H pencils, an HB pencil, and a half or 1 or 2 B pencils. So if you have H pencils on one end and B pencils on the other end, and you bring them together, your middle pencil is an HB pencil. That's your number 2 pencil that you use to fill out Scantrons. Like that's your regular pencil that you would use for writing. That's your middle pencil, like right in the middle. So the higher the number, the lighter or the darker a pencil is. So an 8B is much darker than a 2B. So the higher, the more extreme it is. And you use the very dark and the very light pencils sparingly. So you're using pretty much your pencils in the middle, and then you're darkening things up at the end. And your lighter pencils, you're using them in the beginning, but you're not using them very much. So pencils work best with layering. So you actually want to layer your pencils up. I start with a light pencil. So I start with a 2H or a 4H to get a general gray color going. Once you have that general gray color, then you can like layer on top of that to gradually get darker. What you're trying to do is color that paper in so there's no white underneath of it. So if you use a light pencil, that'll completely shade that piece in. You can't darken or lighten anything until you have some value underneath. So you guys have erasers. I'm going to go over them too, but you guys have 2 different erasers in your possession. You're going to use those erasers kind of as a tool. So think of like your white eraser or your kneaded eraser as a drawing tool for you to use. So once you have a light gray, you're going to start darkening up your areas. So you're going to layer your pencil, going in different directions. You want to actually physically color in the paper. You do not want to see the pencil lines. So, James, if you have your Chromebook, you can log into the Zoom. Okay. Otherwise, I'll go over this with you later. So you don't want to see pencil lines. You don't want to rush. You don't want to scribble. Like, scribbling is bad. Scribbling does not make a good artwork. So it makes awful drawing. Do not, under any circumstances, use a tissue or a paper towel to smear your drawing either. It'll look horrible and awful, and I can't stand it. So you will use your finger to kind of blend areas together, but you will not ever, 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 and you must promise me not to do this because you can tell that you did it, smear it with a tissue or a paper towel, which a lot of people try to do because they're being lazy. In your art kits, I gave you a tortillon, and I'll show you what that is. It's a small paper stump that you have that you can use to blend pencil together. So you do not want to see any pencil lines or any hazy, fuzzy lines in a finished drawing. That just makes bad artwork. Really, really, really bad artwork. So what you do, you layer your pencil up, you start really light, and you gradually get darker. And yes, it takes time, but that's how you do it, and you do it well. You're going to place your pencil lines on the page. You're not going to scribble it and smear it. Like, inevitably, people try and do that where you just scribble it in, and then you try and smear it around with your finger, and it looks awful. And then I can tell you did it, and so can everybody else. Overlap in different directions to get rid of any white spaces that you have on there. And then you're going to use a tortillon or your fingertip to gently blend the value. And then you go back in with an eraser, and you erase out the highlights, and you erase out the lighter spots. You want to use, like I'll show you, use edges for hard lines like hair. Use a kneaded eraser for details. I'll show you how to use those momentarily. So here's an example of the pencils, and they're labeled at the top, and then how dark they are. So you can see like the difference as it gets gradually darker with the type of pencil you have versus what comes out of it, what you're able to achieve. And then here's another one here. So you can see how light the 9H is compared to the 8B or the 9B. As the graphite gets softer, the pencil can get darker. So this is a drawing that I did. I do portraits at home, and I do a lot of dogs, but this is a dog in pencil. So you can see the amount of detail that you can really get with like a regular pencil that you have. It is possible to get really realistic. And if you look at that drawing, there's not one area that's really white on there. And then here's my value scale, my example. This, because of the lighting, like these last four, in person you can tell there's a difference, but right now you can't. So when I demo, my camera isn't going to pick up the hatching or the cross hatching very well. So look at these two right here. So blending is, you want each square to be perfectly blended with one color. Hatching are parallel lines. Their lines are all going in the same direction. And then cross hatching is crossing lines. So it shouldn't look like an X. And these can go in all different directions. They don't necessarily need to all be right there in like an X format. Like it can be everywhere. So on a piece of paper, you guys are going to create, and I'll show you as soon as this is done, but you're going to create 3 1-inch by 9-inch rectangles. And then you're going to divide each rectangle into 1-inch squares. So you'll have 9 boxes for each one. You're going to create 3 different value scales. Blending is the first one, which is the nice and smooth. Hatching, which is the middle one right here, those parallel lines. And then cross hatching over here is your third one. The first square in every single one, leave it white. Don't do anything to it. Just start with the second square. Again, here's my example. So the first one is white, and then you're gradually going to go from lighter to dark. Always go light to dark. If you start at the other end and go super dark, and then you find out you've made the whole thing way too dark, you cannot erase that to bring it back. So start light. You can always make things darker. If you go too dark, you can't come back from that. So you always go light to dark. So the first one's going to be blending. The second one is hatching, so these parallel lines. But same thing. Each box is a little darker than the one before it. And then cross-hatching is the third one, so crossing lines. And like I said, blending is most likely the one that you're going to use when you draw, as opposed to hatching or cross-hatching. All right, remember, each square has to be different from the ones next to it. There should be a 9-step value scale, so it should be 9 different steps from white to black with all gray in between. Start on the lightest side, work your way down. You can always make something darker, but you cannot lighten things up that easily. All right, do you guys have any questions?